All right, guys, we're going to get right into it, guys. We got this. Anytime I see Dave Smith on anybody's show, guys, I click on the video because you're going to hear some real stuff, all right? And so Piers brings on Dave Smith, and then an Israeli shill who makes very, low IQ arguments. So we're going to get into this video here and break down some stuff that they've either forgot to mention or they looked over, but we're gonna analyze this whole shit. But this was embarrassing, guys. This was a absolute smackdown by Dave Smith.
Whose focus is on protecting its people. Yes, the actions may look the same, and in fact, the actions may be just as wrong as each other. They may be just.
What difference does it make to the innocent civilians who are?
Doesn't make a difference.
Well, hang on. What difference does it make to innocent civilians who are killed? Whether one has a better, motivation for doing it. Because my problem with what Israel's doing in Gaza is that in direct contrast to what it did in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in direct contrast to what it did in Iran, both very precise, very targeted, very successful operations, minimal civilian casualties. In Gaza, in Gaza, the strategy has been completely different. It's been a strategy of sort of nihilism, where they just destroy everything in Gaza. Almost every hospital is either now, well, hang on, let me finish, is either destroyed or damaged in some way. We know this actually because we have to listen to British doctors who've come out and told everybody what is actually going on there, because, of course, international journalists are still banned by the IDF, even though they were allowed in previous conflicts in Gaza. They're not allowed in to verify anything in this one, which I find very suspicious. But here's my point, Elika. I defended Israel's right to defend itself after October the 7th, not least because the Hamas spokesman went public almost immediately and said, we want to keep doing this. So I completely understand Israel's not just a need or a right, but a duty to defend its people. However, what we've seen in the last few months, with a 3-month blockade of starvation of already war-torn, impoverished people, and then this constant bombardment, including in the last 6 weeks, endless bombardments of people who are desperately lining up to get food. Yeah. Now, they are dying, it seems very mysteriously. The IDF says we shot in the air as warnings. Sometimes they use other language, which means they may have shot towards people they saw as a threat, or they are now investigating what happened. I read out earlier in a previous debate about this, all the different times this has happened in the last 6 weeks. It's endless. And the idea that the IDF are not killing people in this way, when everybody else involved says they are, is ridiculous. So the point I think Dave is making, quite straightforwardly, is that what the IDF's been doing in the last 3 months, to me, crosses any line of self-defense and could absolutely be categorized as terrorizing the innocent people of Gaza. Now, it doesn't mean they're not in their heads going, they're going after Hamas. Their motivation is, we want to kill the bad guys. But they have lost all sense of proportion, and they are now behaving in a way that if other people were doing it to them, they would categorize as terrorism.
Okay, so let me just answer you in 2 points. First of all, let me...
Yeah, man, I mean, like, the guys, they were deliberately targeting women and children who were coming up to private aid hubs, right, attempting to get food. They would deliberately target them to the point where, like, you had doctor testimonials saying that we're getting infants with legit headshots, right, that look like, there's no other way of explaining it. They were being targeted while they were going to get aid. So these people are sick monsters, guys. You gotta think of like the mentality of and this has happened throughout history, where they would provide aid to a starving population that was being genocided, and they would use that as a way to target them and kill them, because they're obviously going to come out of wherever they're hiding to go grab the food. So this is essentially what's going on in Gaza. Luckily now, it's being televised so we can see exactly what these sick monsters are doing, where they're weaponizing starvation and then essentially killing them as they're getting the aid. So, I mean, it doesn't get worse. How do you even defend that? But let's listen to what this idiot has to say.
Let me ask you this question. If Hamas was entirely separated from the civilian population, let's say it was totally down north and everyone else, up north and everyone else was down south, do you think that we'd see these civilian casualties?
But no enemy in modern warfare has ever been entirely separated from civilian populations. It's for the birds. It doesn't happen.
Another stupid argument. Like, first off, Gaza's like 3 football fields, guys, okay? It's like 30 miles. Like, what? How are you going to separate the civilians from the combatants? And the combatants are underground in tunnels. You know, it's like this is such a stupid argument to make. And I'm not even going to get into, like, you know, how these people are using excuses to target someone who they think is an operative. And at the same time, like, they kill like 100 people while they're targeting that same individual. There's no, I mean, you know, there's no way of justifying that. And for her to say, oh, why don't you separate them in the north and the south, as if like she's some type, you know, dude, knock it the fuck off. You know, Gaza is literally 30 miles. It's like 3 football fields. They act like it's like Iran, where people have wiggle room to move around and they can move civilians in certain areas. Like,
my brother and my brother-in-law were both army colonels, right? It's just, it's for the birds. This idea you get some clean war where civilians are nowhere near any of it. It doesn't really happen ever.
Yes, it does happen, because you just used the example of Iran. You saw
Give me an example when no civilians have been killed in modern warfare.
It's not no civilians, it's the amount of civilians.
Right.
And it is the fact that Hamas, it doesn't just embed itself, it embeds
But
its
there are as
weaponry.
many civilians in Lebanon. In fact, there are more civilians in Lebanon than there are in Gaza. How was it that Mossad was able to target 3,000 members of Hezbollah with a pager device that exploded? But in Gaza, the only way to deal with it, apparently, same situation. In Lebanon, Hezbollah live amongst civilians. The only way they can apparently do it in Gaza is to obliterate Gaza and kill tens of thousands of civilians as they go after Hamas.
Now,
I don't understand the difference.
okay, let me answer the question and then you'll understand. What you're doing right now is you're not just legitimizing Hamas's strategy, you are encouraging it.
No, I'm
because
not.
the whole.
When did I encourage it?
Okay, so let me explain.
Annika,
and then
you know
you'll
people
understand.
are listening to this, right?
Okay,
I mean, they know what I've said.
Piers, if you let me finish my sentence and then at the end of it, you can tell me if you agree. Should we agree on that?
Sure.
Okay. When Hamas intentionally embeds itself amongst civilian populations, the whole point of that strategy is that there'll be so much civilian casualties that the world will look at Israel and say, what an abhorrent pariah state that has lost all legitimacy. Okay, so let me finish. So every time the world does that, every time the world reacts in that way, it reinforces Hamas's behavior because it tells them this works. So in this moment that you're saying this, you are encouraging Hamas to keep doing that.
So we shouldn't talk about the 50, 60, 70,000 civilians.
No, you should.
We don't actually know how many have been killed.
50, 60,000. It was reported by Reuters today, guys. I could pull up the article in a second. 440,000 people missing in Gaza. Everyone's agreeing there's only about 1.8 million left. There was 2.2 to begin with, and at least 500,000 have been slaughtered. This is another propaganda tactic they like to use. Oh, it's just 50, 60,000 people. I guess in their minds that somehow makes it like, you know, not considered a genocide. No, it's a genocide. 500,000 people slaughtered. Okay, let's cut the shit. Start using correct numbers.
We
here.
know we believe 70,000 have been killed, of which perhaps 25 to 30,000 are Hamas. We don't know, because no one can ever give me actual figures.
You should talk about it, and you should frame it within the context of, look how much destruction there is when terrorists embed themselves in civilian populations.
Right,
No, dumbass. No one wants to use your fake ass propaganda tactics and propaganda tools that you get from like the Mossad. Like, no, that's not how we're gonna frame it. We're gonna frame it for what it is. 500,000 people slaughtered. 20-month war. Israel has the capabilities to make strategic, strikes to where they could target operatives. You know, they did that all the way from Israel to Iran, which is thousands of miles away. Okay. And let's cut the fucking bullshit. This is the fucking ethnic cleansing and genocide. We're not going to use your talking points. She's imposing her talking points on like Dave Smith and Piers, which is, I mean, no. But let's get into it, Dave.
Let me get Dave to respond. Let me get Dave to respond.
This is just we should talk about it, but only in the framework that it's not the fault of the people who are dropping the bombs on the innocent people or shooting the people who are the ones. Hey, you know what? You just asked. You just had. Excuse me. You just had your whole thing about let you finish and then you can respond to that. So why don't we do the same? I know.
And you stopped me when you were being
You opened by saying that Piers. You got interrupted when you said Piers was running cover for Hamas by pointing out that Israel's going too far. Quiet. Let me. No, you didn't. Your point stopped. Listen.
All right, don't talk over each other. Elika, let Dave respond, and then you respond to him.
I listened to the garbage you had to say.
Let him respond, then you reply.
Let me get in now.
But I didn't say
I
no
know.
response.
All right, but stop talking.
Lady, let me just save you all the time in this debate. You wanted to debate me because I'm so wrong about everything and I'm so influential, and you wanted to smack it down. It ain't going to be you, lady. You're not the one who's going to stop me. This is just ridiculous.
It's lady.
Okay, I'll call you whatever. Oh, okay, good one. Oh yeah, you really smacked down my bad ideas. Anyway, again, all they have.
To realize it. You're too stupid to realize how bad your ideas are.
There you go. That's the argument you got. Anyway, can I talk now?
Sure.
Okay. So Piers, as always, it's just the same thing on repeat here, right? So the defense is to go, but look, the motivation of Israel is pure. The motivation of everybody else is evil, even though obviously what Israel is doing is objectively torturing women and children to death as they die with their bones crushed under rubble. But also, Piers, don't let it mess with you that at the highest levels of the Israeli government, they've kind of told you what their motivations are here. I mean, the South African case that they brought to the International Court of Justice was like 90% just direct quotes from Israeli leaders. The prime minister himself referred to them as Amalek when talking to the military. You got the finance minister, the defense minister bragging about how nobody's getting any food for a 3-month period, bragging that not one ounce of grain will get into Gaza. I mean, I'm sorry. This is obviously terrorism. It borders on genocide. It's horrifically wrong. And for you to use your example of saying like, oh, this is what I'm saying is that a guy who robs a store and a cop who comes to stop them are committing the same act because they're pointing a gun at each other. Yeah, but of course, in that example, they're right. But in that, no, that's what you said. That's what you said about my point. And it was really dumb. Because in that example, there aren't innocent people being slaughtered. Yeah, it kind of is.
Go, man, let's go.
Okay, so all right, Elika, let me ask you a question, which is this. Are you comfortable with everything that Israel's done in the last 3 months?
No, I've always said that there should be dual criticism, and that's exactly what my problem has been this whole time. Everybody's criticizing Israel, which is fair, but why isn't anybody criticizing the reason why Gaza looks like this? Because Hamas has decided to embed itself.
They are, though. I mean, I couldn't have been more critical of Hamas going back 20 months. I mean, I still am now. I think they're a despicable terror group. Well, they're a despicable terror group who committed one of the worst terror attacks of modern times. I mean,
your earpiece maybe wasn't working for the whole first 5 minutes of this, where me and Piers both agreed that the previous guest was ridiculous to downplay Hamas's crimes and that they had committed horrific acts of terrorism.
Elika.
What I was responding to in terms of what Piers said to me, he was talking about why is it that we can do targeted military strikes in Iran, but we've decided to entirely desecrate Gaza. And my response was that, not saying that it was right, but I'm saying that when Hamas embeds itself in all of Gaza, it is going to result in ruin. And it reinforces the point that I've been making this entire time, not just since October 7th, but for the past 3 years that I've been talking about terrorist regimes, which is that they bring mass death and destruction everywhere they go.
Well, that is true. I agree with that. But I also know that Israel, through Mossad, have supposedly the most sophisticated, experienced intelligence operation in the world.
It's funny how they don't mention like all of these wars that have been going on for the past 20 months were not all started for the majority. Especially the last one with Iran, that was strictly, I mean, Israel started that whole Pandora box there. So that's a whole situation that Israel initially started. And they could have gotten the hostages literally the next day because Hamas handed it to them. They're like, here, take your hostages. We miscalculated. We didn't know that you're going to implement the Hannibal Directive and kill like 700 of your citizens. Now we look like these crazy monsters who are just, a few enraged lunatics that came in to attack, strictly target like IDF soldiers. Now it looks like they were massacring civilians, all this other shit. So no one wants to talk about that fact. Like the war could have been ended the next day, right? And then they could have either went in there surgically, eliminated Hamas, and got them to degraded them but they decided to start a war with Lebanon. They decided to start a war with a regime change in Syria, and then they launched one of the biggest attacks on Iran. During like a time when they were supposed to negotiate and have nuclear talks, right? And on that Sunday, they decided to launch a surprise attack on Wednesday, where they have like Mossad infiltrators within Iran, who literally took out the first line of the first line in the IRGC, like the commanders and stuff like that. And then they took out the air defenses, and they were attacking them for like an hour, 2 hours. I mean, like, they're the aggressor usually, like in 80% of the time, and they have the upper hand. They act like Gaza, like Hamas and Israel are militarily comparable when they're not. Israel's like this. It's the most well-equipped, armed nation in the world. Even Ukraine, who's like literally being taken over by Russia as we speak, don't even get the same air defense missiles that Israel gets. They don't even get the same technologically advanced armaments. They don't get any of that shit. Israel's like a fucking superpower in the, so, and they're still in a 20-month war with Hamas in Gaza, and then they started a whole other war with Iran. I mean, come on, man. Let's.
And it was brilliantly seen with the Hezbollah pager attack. It's been brilliantly identified by the way they managed to identify where all the military leaders and nuclear scientists and nuclear sites were going to be in Iran for Israel to attack. From a purely military perspective and intelligence perspective, Israel did an extraordinary job, both with dealing with Hezbollah and the Iranian regime. However, it does just beg the obvious question. Why were they not able to foresee in any way, apparently, that Hamas were going to spend 20 years spending the billions of dollars which Netanyahu...
Well, let me answer that for you, Piers, because they financed them, funded them, they helped build their tunnel system, because they were planning this war from 20 years ago. They were planning this war, and they ensured that the legitimate Palestinian cause was never going to be an actual reality, because there's always going to be the whole notion that we have a terrorist organization, running the Gaza Strip, which kills civilians and they're Islamist, and they want to wipe Israel out. So they delegitimized an actual Palestinian cause by separating the two and funding what they refer to as a terrorist organization or an organization that's like militant. So, I mean, come on, man.
Encouraged them to have, because he believed in divide and rule with the Palestinian Authority, that they had these billions of dollars and were spending it on creating one of the world's biggest underground tunnel systems to operate from. And then how did Mossad not know anything about 3,000 Hamas terrorists pouring over its border when they're literally on their border and they're guarding it all day long? So I just cannot understand how this could have happened. And then I don't understand why Israel is responding in a way which it's never responded to anything like this in this way before. Why is Gaza? And then you had the Smodrich quotes, Alika, where he brazenly talks now last week on camera that the plan now is to cleanse Gaza of Palestinians. That is ethnic cleansing. That is a war crime.
That's obviously wrong. That's obviously
Good.
wrong.
So we need to agree. We need to agree certain things like that, because honestly, it's important to me. It's like when people don't condemn Hamas, I sort of tune out, because it's like, the last guy, the moment he just said he was proud of what Hamas did, I tune out of him as a credible guest. But if you're prepared to admit, which very, very few pro-Israelis right now will admit, which is that some of this strategy is completely wrong, I think we may get somewhere.
It's so foundational to acknowledge that fact. It is so foundational to say that just because you have the right to defend yourself, it doesn't mean that you have carte blanche. It is so foundational to acknowledge all of these things, to acknowledge the death, the destruction, all of it. This is not what my conversation is about.
Okay.
This is not about has there been damage or destruction or whatever. The whole point of this conversation is that you're making moral equivalencies. And these moral equivalencies blur the distinction between right and wrong, good and evil. Now, you can say that, but some of these actions look like they are evil in themselves, but the entire entire conversation always goes down to intent. That is what our entire criminal justice system is.
But I don't agree with that. I honestly don't agree. You've just said that some of the, unless I'm wrong, you've just said that some of the things Israel's been doing are evil. Right? You've drawn your own moral equivalency. You said both sides are doing... Well, hang on. Both sides are doing evil things. That's surely the point Dave Smith was making.
Holy shit, bro.
No, let me tell you why. Let me tell you why it's different. Because there is one side that kills ideology to protect its people, and there is one side that kills people to protect its ideology. That is the difference. I'm going to give you an example so you understand the nuance of what I'm trying to say. Let's say that there's a room of 100 people, okay? And in that 100 people, you're told that 10 of these people want to kill your people. Now, if you were to shoot and kill everyone in that room, that is objectively immoral and wrong. Objectively, right? But you are doing it out of protection. It's still disgusting and abhorrent and wrong. Now, let's say at the same time, you know that 10 people in that room of innocent civilians are against your ideology, and you murder the entire room to protect your ideology. Both actions are equally immoral and evil as each other, but the motivation is completely different, and you cannot make equivalencies of those motivations.
All right, Dave?
But you, in your own words, you just said that both actions are equally immoral. I mean, this just, it sounds, right. Okay. It sounds a lot like kind of the rationalization that your first guest was saying there, Piers, that like, well, you know, everybody serves in the IDF in Israel, and therefore we really just got to go after everybody because you never know who here might be one of our oppressors or something like that. It's all just ridiculous logic. And look, there's the what is the intention of an ethnic cleansing campaign? Is that an unintended consequence as Israel is floating this out? Huh?
It's not an ethnic cleansing campaign. This is you just regurgitate buzzwords. But I clearly said that
I'm not. No, hold on. Listen, this is what just so wait. No, I'm not regurgitating buzzwords. I'm talking about what one of the most powerful people at the absolute top of the Israeli government, their finance minister, said. Look, the people, the Palestinians in Gaza in the West Bank are there largely because they were ethnically cleansed out of where they were living for generations before that. So no, I'm sorry. It's just what's ridiculous. What are you talking about? Ethnically cleansed? You're talking
about the Nakba.
Yes.
Yeah, you're talking about the fact that when the war broke out against Israel, that some of the camps were exiled because some of them were collaborating with the Arabs that were engaging in the war with Israel, and others of them were not, which is why they were grandfathered.
Right. Yeah. 750,000 people were forced out of their house and did. Oh no, actually, we are, and you don't get to just say we're not going to get into this conversation.
You're not answering the point. You're not answering the point that I've made. I clearly said in that example that I gave you that both of those situations were completely wrong, but the motivation was different, and that is how you know. And you haven't addressed that.
No, sorry. Maybe you're not getting me. Yes, I think it's completely ridiculous for you to just get to claim that the Israeli motivations are pure. I'm sorry, especially when listen, Benjamin.
Who said pure?
Okay, whatever.
Pure?
Okay, you're just breaking up. You don't get to just claim this is nonsense. You don't get to. Oh my God, you just have nothing except nonsense and interrupting me.
Shut the fuck up. Seriously.
So when Benjamin Netanyahu goes to the United Nations a couple of weeks before October 7th and has greater Israel on a map where all of Gaza and all of the West Bank are Israel, I'm sorry. Why is it that you just get to give him the assumption that the motivation here wasn't to destroy Gaza, ethnically cleanse it, and annex it, as they're openly talking about doing right now? Now, I'm sure there's some people in Israel who don't have those motivations. I'm sure there are some people in Hamas who maybe just wanted to have a two-state solution. But still, when the overwhelming motivations of the leadership are this impure, I don't think you get to say, oh, there's a major difference between, because one side's motivation is purely just to get the bad guys.
Okay, let's just pivot. Hang on a sec. I want to pivot to Iran because, Dave, you on 22nd of June, and I've obviously talked to you on the show as well around this period, you posted on X, Donald Trump's now launched an illegal...
man, that hurt my brain, bro.
...war of aggression against Iran. The risk of an absolute catastrophe is very high and the benefits are non-existent. Worst of all, he did it on behalf of a foreign government against a country who posed no threat to us. Now, as things stand, it looks increasingly like Trump brought all this to an end with targeting 3 nuclear strikes with the B-2 bunker buster bombs. We don't know the scale of the damage, but even the Iranians are saying significant. And the war appears to be now at a ceasefire stage after 12 days, which is being kept and held, which I'm astonished by. Trump has no desire, made it clear, to put any boots on the ground or to affect any America-driven regime change. I think he was misinterpreted when he first talked about that. I think he meant an organic regime change possibly happening a la Syria in December, but we don't know. But that was my take on what he said. But he certainly clarified that now as he doesn't want Americans to force it. What is actually wrong with what has happened and unfurled here? I mean, given what the Atomic Agency report made clear, that the Iranians have been enriching uranium from a safe civilian usage of 3.5–4% to 60% in rapid time, and they were hiding information, they were obfuscating, they weren't allowing proper, full, transparent inspections and so on. You know, is there really anything ideological on putting aside Gaza, putting aside everything else, purely on the apparently imminent threat? By imminent, I mean in the next few months, that the Iranians would have had an ability to weaponize their uranium quite quickly to 90% and potentially create up to 10 nuclear bombs, having assured the world they wouldn't do that. They are supporting and promoting every terror group going from Hezbollah to the Houthis to Hamas to destroy Israel. If you're Israel, why would you not preemptively strike? And if you're the United States, and you've got the leaders of the Iranian regime saying death to America and encouraging that chant, why would you also not want to neutralize the nuclear sites?
Well, let me start by saying that I really am just absolutely thrilled that, number one, that the Iranians gave that warning and that their response was kind of like one of those Iranian responses where we want to seem tough, but we sure do want to make sure we don't kill any Americans that could get us destroyed. And I'm thrilled that Donald Trump took that off-ramp and immediately started pushing a ceasefire. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, but thank God that he did that, because, and I think all sane people around the world should be thankful that he took that off-ramp and this didn't lead to a catastrophe. But no, I mean, I think that I think essentially your question is all flawed. I mean, even in the IAEA report that you're referring to, they also reiterated that Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb and that they have not made the decision to start pursuing one. And so there was no imminent threat. Listen, even Benjamin Netanyahu, in his interview with Brett Baer, who always, Piers, as you know, has a long history of just making up how long the Iranians are to developing a nuke, even he said maybe a year, 13 months. But the point is that in order for them to do that, they would have had to kick the inspectors out. And then it would have taken them at least a matter of years to develop a nuclear bomb if they had made the political decision to start seeking one, and then it would have taken them a while to figure out.
Do you think they should have one?
My point.
Do you think Iran should have a nuclear bomb?
No, I don't think.
All right, I got to push back on this, guys, because a lot of people have like this conception that, like, look, first off, the IAEA is completely compromised, okay, by we know who, Mossad. They're the ones that illegally dropped nuclear scientists' names and locations in Iran, which Iran gave them information previously while they were in Iran doing the inspections, and they name dropped these people. They were all of them were assassinated. About 19 of them, not all, but 19 of them were assassinated. Iran had to like import 200 Russian nuclear scientists over in Iran to, move their centrifuges around and stuff like that. And they moved it a week ago. There's a video of some guy like literally detailing how there were 16 convoy trucks outside of Fordo. They grabbed the centrifuges. People think like it's like this huge complicated process, and there's like, it's like a facility. That means there's like buildings, and the centrifuges are quite easy to move around. And they do have the uranium. They have enriched it. They have the fissile material. When you're enriching it in the centrifuge, it splits into U-23 and U-33, and then it eventually, like, once you extract the uranium, that's all you really need. They have the uranium. There's a report saying that there's like 400 kilograms of uranium that they move around. As long as they have the uranium, they can always create a bomb. So essentially, they have the fucking bomb, regardless. Like, but they're using the nuclear thing as like an excuse to scare the public into being like, oh wow, do we really want a regime like that is saying all this provocative stuff towards America having a nuclear bomb? The only reason Israel's trying to get involved in Iran is for regime change. That's it. There's no other reason, okay? Because they want to neutralize anyone that has any type of power or leverage in the region, and they want to monopolize the entire region. Okay, so that way they're the main superpower there. And this is all we can talk about geopolitically, how this, helps America combat the Chinese threat and this and that. But that's essentially what the issue is. Iran's too strong for them to be left alone like that. And when they use a nuclear bomb scam on everybody, because Netanyahu's been saying they had they've had a nuclear bomb for like at least, since the 70s. He's saying that they are a week away from a nuclear weapon. Guys, that's old technology. You got to think about it. That shit was created back in the 30s. Who the fuck can't get a nuclear bomb nowadays? Who can't, And if you look at the science behind it, it's not as hard as people make it seem like it is, right? So they move the centrifuges. As long as they have the uranium, they can always slap it onto a warhead. And I don't know the exact sciences behind it, but you can watch videos on how they do it, how it gets extracted, and then they put it through the centrifuge, and then they weaponize, they put it in that little casing and shit, and they have the shit, man. Like, let's cut the shit. And then Pentagon officials several Pentagon officials have come out and said that they already have the fissile material. They've had it for years, but they haven't actually made, I guess, put everything together and actually made the bomb yet. So that's what Netanyahu has been using for the past 40 years as like some type of a threat. And even if they did have it, they don't have the capability to launch it towards America. And really, nuclear weapons is it's more of a deterrence. Pakistan has it. Pakistan's much more dangerous than Iran, to be honest with you guys, because their military is crazy, but they get a lot of money from the United States to kind of cool it down. Like, yo, don't engage in anything militarily, and they have India over their head where they could kind of spark that up. And India's a superpower too. With they have a very strong army. So it's all a fucking scam, man.
I think anybody should have nuclear weapons.
Right,
so
but do you think in particular Iran should have one, given how much it supports terrorist groups?
Well, I will answer that question. Let me just say the point I was making there is just that there was no imminent threat. We had more than enough time to do what the American legal system requires in this situation, which is that you bring it to Congress so that the people theoretically can have a debate through their representatives.
But actually,
and a declaration
as you know,
of war
David,
can be launched.
I saw AOC making that argument, and I replied to her, almost every military strike ordered by an American president this century has been done without prior congressional approval.
Prior congressional approval. Obama bombed the hell out of Libya, Somalia, Iraq, Iran. Not Iran. What was that? Yeah, Libya, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan. This guy fucking literally was probably one of the worst presidents when it comes to foreign policy and geopolitics. This guy was bombing everybody, and then he gave Iran like $300 or $400 billion or something like that. So, guys, all this whole bullshit where that Trump needs congressional approval and all that shit. It's all bullshit. We know the Congress is compromised anyway. So,
what type of argument is that, Piers? Every war since World War II has been fought undeclared. That doesn't mean it's the proper.
But the argument is that
system.
if you go for congressional approval, inevitably it will leak out, and you lose the element of surprise.
Yeah, okay, but then the argument also is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the founders very intentionally placed war-making power in the Congress because they didn't want it to be. They didn't want the president to have the war-making powers of a king. Now,
yeah, but
listen,
it does. Commander-in-chief can make military strikes as well. It just can't declare war.
Yeah, well, there's some debate about that amongst constitutional scholars, but yes, but that refers to like an imminent threat, which by all accounts this wasn't. Now, listen, I don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. I think that everything that U.S. but basically all of U.S. and Israeli foreign policy seems to have been geared around incentivizing them to make one for about as long as I've been alive, which I think is very counterproductive. But I will say that I think there is a couple thoughts here that I think people should really consider. And number one, that I don't, I still think that Donald Trump, as great as it is that he walked us back from this, I think it was totally reckless and wrong for him to launch it to begin with. But think about this. The whole foundational claim for the Hawks' justification about Iran getting a nuke here, because obviously lots of really, really bad people have had nuclear weapons in the history of the world, and that's not a good thing. But like Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong and like, today, current Vladimir Putin, China, I mean, there's lots of really bad regimes that have nuclear weapons. It's almost never been on the table among serious people that we ought to launch a war of aggression and choice because of regime. But the claim here is that Iran is so crazy. There are these religious fundamentalists, and self-preservation simply isn't a motivating factor for them, and therefore they can't be allowed to get it.
You wouldn't dispute that. You wouldn't dispute though the central argument that Israel has about it, which is that Iran has been the main sponsor for Hamas, the Houthis and Hezbollah for a number of years, all of whom are terror groups wedded to eliminating Israel. You wouldn't dispute that?
I don't dispute that they have supported those groups, and I don't dispute that that's the Israeli
isn't that
claim.
right there, the existential threat to Israel?
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, but Israel, listen, if Israel is the only country in the Middle East who secretly has nuclear weapons and is not a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and they also funded Hamas. So I'm sorry, I do not think it's a legitimate justification for them to launch a war because they claim someone else is making nukes when they're not, and they also funded Hamas or something like that. So no.
Iran has never provoked any country in the region nor anywhere in the world. All it's doing is defending itself. The United States and Israel have attacked like hundreds of fucking countries over there. They have, man, the U.S. has like over 300 bases worldwide, occupying other people's fucking countries and shit with their bases in order to dominate them and make sure that the American hegemony, maintains their fucking dominance. That's what it's all about. It's really to occupy that land, build a U.S. base on there so he could use it to start a war with China. I mean, come on, man, fuck out of here.
Can I respond to this now? First of all, this claim that there's no evidence that the regime is making nukes is totally false. It's totally false. We know that they've enriched to 60%, which means they're 90% of the way there. There's no reason to have anything above 3 to 5% for civilian use. Everybody understands that 60%, the only purpose of it is for nuclear weapons. Now, for a long time, the US and the Western world have been trying to delay the breakout time. That was the whole point of the JCPOA and all of these other deals, was that we know that they're months away, right? That's why you keep saying, oh, they've been months away for years, right? But they've been trying to extend the breakout time from months away to at least a year away for the past 10 to 15 years. So actually, everybody is fully aware that the regime has always been months away from developing nuclear weapons. Now, second of all, again, it's making these moral equivalencies between the United States or different countries or Israel or whoever having nuclear capabilities. What you're talking about here is a regime whose fundamental motto, its entire basis of existence, is death to Israel and death to the United States. That is what it stands. No,
that's not their entire basis of existence. First off, MI6 and CIA overthrew the only democracy that was in Iran under Mossadegh, and before that they overthrew someone else in the 1920s, and they overthrew Mossadegh. They installed a monarch, the Shah, which he gained prominence during his rule. And he was going to nationalize oil and all this other stuff for the Iranian people. And then they ended up overthrowing him. Then they installed Khamenei's regime. And so, no, the CIA and MI6 have been trying to neutralize Iran so it becomes like a Libya-style state. But the Iranians aren't, they're very organized people. I mean, it's been a civilization that's existed 3,000 years. America was created 250 years ago. Okay, so Israel even less than that. So, the literal sabotage, the deliberate sabotage that the Iranians have experienced, and that's part of the reason why literally 80% of the Iranians, the majority of the country, stood with the IRGC, because they're not that stupid to not realize, like, okay, that we're being overthrown and occupied by these intelligence agencies, like especially the Western America, like the list of crimes, the international war crimes that they've committed in that region, and then they funded Saddam to attack Iran, to weaken. They've been trying to weaken Iran for years, okay, and that's one cookie they can't crumble, guys. All right, so that's really what's behind the situation. It has nothing to do with Iran being like this outwardly, provocative country in the Middle East where they're like, oh, we have to death to America and death to Israel, which they've clarified before that they're saying death to the regimes that are in charge of these two countries because they're the ones that are causing havoc in that region. That's what
that is what its leaders chant on a daily basis. That is what school children have to chant in the playground before they start school every day. Death to America, death to Israel. Every day, their strategy is how do we destroy the United States and how do we destroy Israel? Now, when you have an expansionist ideology that has eschatological beliefs about the end of the world and the end of Israel, and the desire is to proliferate and export its ideology of velayat faqih, not just to the Middle East, but to the entire world, and you say, I don't understand what's the difference between them having nukes.
It's a projection. The extremist Israeli Jews that are in power now, the Zionists or whatever you want to call them, they have just as much eschatological and religious, over-exaggerated or extremist religious views as you could say the mullahs in Iran. So, I mean, again, these are all projections. They have, the fact that Netanyahu used Bible references, and that they want to build a third temple of Solomon and this and that. They did the whole cow heifer thing. I mean, dude, come on. You can't just go and criticize one regime for being theocratic, and you want to make it seem like they're practicing the extreme version of their theocracy, and then defend another supposed democracy when it's really part of it. A lot of their belief system is embedded with it, like it's theocratic in nature. Where they believe that they're the chosen people and that, one day that they have to get rid of Amalek for their Messiah to come back. And so, I mean, yeah, you can't
and
make
others
that
having
argument.
nukes, that is just profoundly misguided. Second of all,
I didn't say that.
Second of all, this isn't just about the threat of the nukes themselves. I don't think anyone's thinking to themselves that that the Islamic Republic's just going to drop a nuke as soon as it has one. The whole point of it reaching nuclear capabilities is that it becomes a deterrent state. Once it becomes a deterrent state, how are you going to deter its bad behaviors? How are you going to prevent its alliances with its regional proxies? How are you going to prevent more October 7th when everything you try to do to sanction them and contain them is met with, what are you going to do? We've got nukes. And it also prevents the containment of the region, because now UAE, Egypt, all of these other countries are so under threat that they also have to develop nuclear capabilities. So it is actually allowing them to get that far. That would be the cause of regional and global instability. So it's just preposterous to say that we should have just done nothing about that or got into another deal that just kicked the can down the road again. We are in the position that we are in because nobody contained this for as many decades as it's been a growing threat. We've passed the Neville Chamberlain moment.
Okay.
Totally. It's just total bullshit. I mean, just listen, the reason why now this 60% enrichment, which obviously for anyone paying attention there is another reason besides they were developing a nuclear weapon, which again, all of the intelligence says they had not even made the political decision that they wanted to develop a nuclear weapon yet, let alone weren't doing it. It was a chip to bargain away, which is actually what they were trying to do. They were in the middle of negotiations when Israel snuck attacked them and launched
that means you concede. Hang on. That means you concede that what they were doing was creating the impression that they were going to build a nuclear bomb.
Listen, there's no question that they upped the enrichment. But listen, here's the point. They weren't allowed to, under the JCPOA. Under the JCPOA, when America was involved, they weren't allowed to enrich to this level, but they were allowed to do it if America pulled out. That's in the JCPOA agreement. And so when Donald Trump tore that up, and walked away, they brought their enrichment up. What were the negotiations, Piers, that were happening right before Israel launched their surprise attack? It was for Iran to bring the enrichment back down and America to get back in some type of agreement. They weren't going to call it the JCPOA because Donald Trump would have had to make it his own thing and not getting back into Obama's.
Trump gave them 60 days to negotiate. Trump said he got 60 days, and day 61, Israel attacked.
Right. Okay. Now, but what happened, and this was widely reported, and Donald Trump himself acknowledged this, is that the hawks insisted that you put a poison pill in the negotiations. This is what Mark Levin was freaking out about, and that the standard has to be that Iran must give up all nuclear enrichment altogether. This was always a poison pill so that the point is that Iran was willing to negotiate. And so if you really wanted to get back into that deal, Donald Trump honestly just never should have torn up the JCPOA, and we'd all be in a much better entire situation. It ushered in a new inspection regime. And so we know, this is why we know that they're enriching up to 60%, because they're still in the agreement and they still have the inspections, unlike Israel.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. I'm sure since you know about the JCPOA, I'm sure you know that it was replete with sunset provisions for up to 10 to 15 years, where all of those containment would be expired, and they would have more than $150 billion to continue developing their missiles and nuclear programs. The JCPOA was never a solution. Not only that, but not only did they inherit more than $100 billion, they were also able to expand their regional terror. And Khamenei repeatedly came on television and said, we are going to use that money to fund our allies. So there was actually a backdoor to the JCPOA where the regime, the Islamic Republic, was able to expand its regional influence and fund its allies, which eventually led to October 7th, which eventually brought us to where we are now. So yes, the JCPOA did intend to temporarily constrain their nuclear abilities, but it was always understood that by the time it expired, they would be $150 billion richer, their proxies would be fortified, they would have been responsible for significant regional destabilization, and then they would be able to enrich if they wanted to. And the only way to prevent that was to get into another nuclear deal, which would require unfreezing hundreds and billions of more. So they would just keep getting enriched, rich and empowered. So the question is, how does this end? Just a lifetime of JCPOAs?
Well, let me ask a question just to end this, because we've run out of time. Dave, hang on. Let me put a question to Dave, which is that if it turns out that all this activity in the last 2 weeks drives Iran to the negotiating table, they do agree to give up a lot of their enriched uranium and so on, reduce it back to civilian levels and so on, and there is a period of sustained peace in the region, and the Gaza hell is brought to an end as well, and in 6 months' time, all this is over. Should Donald Trump get the Nobel Peace Prize? Because Barack Obama got one 8 months into his tenure for basically just doing a bit of fancy chat about world peace.
Well, I guess grading on the Obama curve, everybody deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, literally, the three of us are much better candidates than Barack Obama was. So judging on that curve. No, look, I mean, I think that would be great if that's the result of all of this. I think that.
All right, guys. Well, that was the debate, guys. I mean, like, Dave Smith killed it as usual. So shout out to him. Shout out to him, guys. Again, like, the thing is, we have to know when they start coming with these, talking points that are literally out of this world, you got to be able to know and identify fake propaganda, because they like to use a lot of it. And they've been using it for the longest time, man, for the past 20 years, especially with Iraq and Afghanistan, right? Like, that was a whole propaganda-filled war where Iraq had WMDs, and then people got to where the actual, facilities were, kind of what they're doing with Iran. And then they find out, there was just like chlorine bombs in that fucking facility. It wasn't even the nuclear bomb or anything like that. And that whole nuclear bomb shit is a joke. Every country's capable of making one, and it can be done in less. It doesn't take fucking years to make a nuclear bomb. I mean, there's videos all over the internet you could watch scientifically, which prove that, it doesn't take a fucking genius to be able to either purchase one or at least get something like Iran's doing. They have over 200-300 Russian scientists working on one right now. So this was reported a week ago after the ceasefire, or during the ceasefire. They have Russian scientists on the ground ensuring that the facilities are intact, which they are. At least the enriched uranium is. No one knows where that is, right? You're never going to be able to find that. But they're going to use that as a pretext to get into this long war again in the Middle East in order to effect regime change, which we saw what happened with Iraq. We saw what happened with Afghanistan. They replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. They were giving them $30 million a week. So not to to kind of work with them. Yeah, man. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, man. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.